Welcome to yet another session of For Work Talks, where we talk about all things future of work. Today, I'm talking to a very dear friend, philosopher, and guide, somebody who needs no introduction in this part of the world, Colonel Gopal Karunakaran. Colonel Gopal, as we all know, is currently the president of Shiv Nadar University and CEO of Shiv Nadar Schools. Colonel Gopal has a very, very illustrious past, and today there's a reason why I requested and invited him to come and speak to us. For more than 30 years, Colonel Gopal has served the Indian Army. Among many other achievements, he's seen the real action in Siachen. He's been at the helm of certain UN missions. So essentially, somebody who's been there, done that, and seen it all. Colonel Gopal today is helping navigate a very unprecedented VUCA situation in the education sector. And I thought it would be very apt for us to have a conversation with him, trying to understand what does VUCA mean to education and specifically what are some of the patterns emerging. Colonel Gopal, thank you so much for taking time out and welcome to Forward Talks.
Thank you so much, Shaakun. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to be able to talk about something, let's be fair, none of us is too sure about and not too sure about how the world's going to pan out in the next 1 month, next 6 months, maybe even a year. Hopefully, it won't be longer than that, but I'll be glad to share my thoughts and experiences about the situation that we are in. And you mentioned VUCA. VUCA is a very interesting term, which again came out of the military, something like 20 or 25 years ago. Um, American military term, and VUCA was meant to say that the 20th century or the later part of the 20th century will always be uh, exemplified by being volatile, by being uncertain, being very complex, and being very ambiguous. And we always thought when I was in the military that it's probably true for military warfare, but did we never realized it's probably going to be true for the world in the pandemic that we are seeing. We are in the midst of the VUCA world for sure.
Indeed, it's a very unique kind of a VUCA today. And I'm already in love with your t-shirt, Colonel Gopal. This is something
it's a VUCA
so
t-shirt.
relevant and everybody should have that.
There is a bit of a background to the t-shirt, but anyway.
Oh, we would love to hear that.
Okay. So at the Shiv Nadar School, we have themes every year, and we have something called a reward and recognition event. And we sort of have often talked about leading schools also in this VUCA environment. But now we realize that let's turn it around, make t-shirts. Every teacher actually has one. And during the reward and recognition event, something we look forward to this time, it was completely online, 1,000 people online. And during the event, we talked about what VUCA could mean, because it shows the sort of nimbleness that we all need to look at, right? And therefore, while we stood for volatility, for us, it's about vision. And U is for understanding, as much of understanding as we can to make of the sort of world that we're going to see. And while C is supposed to be complex, but how much clarity can we bring into this? And how much clarity can we bring in this case to online education, to the future of education, and what are the missing pieces, and how we're going to solve those missing pieces. So that is what the C is for. And A is actually for what I think everybody is sort of demonstrated, at least those who are willing to work hard and make sure they survive, which is agility. And if you're not agile in these times, we are unlikely to survive. So I think that's what VUCA means, and that's what this t-shirt is all about.
Oh, I think that's a very interesting take on VUCA. Army gave or the defense sector gave this term to the management sector, and now you are bringing the twist of education here. So very interesting. Colonel Gopal, I had a specific observation. I was reading somewhere that when you compare this pandemic with the earlier pandemic, one of the things, and I'm forgetting which was that agency, but they did some research to figure out what are the top concerns that people have today in their mind. And what were the top concerns that people had, say, during the last pandemic of similar nature, which was about perhaps 100 years ago, the Spanish flu? Education and continuity of education apparently is one of the biggest concerns that people like you and I have, both our own education and more importantly, the continuation of the education of the younger generation. Why do you think this massive shift has happened? Why education has become so central that even in these kind of uncertain times and pandemic situation where life is at risk, people do not want to compromise on the continuity of education?
So I think firstly, let's be fair to humanity. Nobody's seen as a pandemic of this proportion ever in humanity. I mean, the last really major pandemic was 300 years ago. Interestingly, it also emanated from China, went to Italy and Spain, and actually decimated one third of Europe's population. But that was 350 years ago. So education was nothing like what it is now. Education is so universal in its coverage and impact now. Education was limited to elite people at that point of time, and I think so. One of it is the sheer scale that virtually every country, virtually every socio-economic bracket has been impacted, and so much hinges on education now. You know, work and education is so connected. Work and education wasn't as connected. You know, you learned the classics to be a better human being 300 years ago. You didn't necessarily get educated or skilled to join the labor force. You could join the labor force without knowing your Latin and your Greek and your French and those sort of things. So I suppose the fact is it's so intricately linked to livelihood. Uh, I think that's the singular reason, and of course the incredible scale that it touches every country, touches every socio-economic bracket, and of course the complexity further is the online to physical and the ability to deliver that. So I think these are all the complex reasons why education is right on top of everybody's concerns.
So, Colonel Gopal, you're right, absolutely right. You know, the meaning of education over the last 350 years has significantly changed, of course. What is also happening, and this started happening even before the pandemic, but now suddenly that has got accelerated. The world of work has significantly changed, as we all know. There are newer roles, newer skill sets, and newer ways of working evolving. Therefore, it calls for new skill sets, new kind of competencies to be built in. In that context, we also see that within India, for example, the education policy is also undergoing change. We heard earlier how Google is trying to democratize, academic education and university education and so on. So considering so many rapid changes and so many complex evolutions happening in this society, how do you see the relevance, role, and importance of academic qualifications evolving over a period of time?
Yeah, I think it's a great thought and a great question, because I think we're seeing maybe a very nascent stage of that sort of shift, but I think academic qualifications are going to get overrated. It's what I think is going to happen very early right now. Everybody does want a degree. Everybody does think there's value in getting higher degrees, but for many reasons, I think it's going to dwindle in importance. Because when I look at college and university, which is where I am right now, I'm speaking to you from the Shiv Nadar University campus. When I look at companies who come here and look at talent 4 years after their education and their degree, what do you see? You see them meeting students, potential employers, and assessing them for skills. They're not looking at what is the CGPA of the student as the first thing that they're considering, right? They're not even sometimes, interestingly, looking at the program that you graduated in. You can go to Goldman Sachs with a big package, having done mechanical engineering at a university, right? So what they're seeing is clearly skill sets, and what sort of skill sets are those which are more important. I think so. What one certain shift is is the skill sets that are necessary for employment. And there are tangible skill sets, and I think there are sort of intangible skill sets. Communication, for example, is tangible. It's visible. You can see it. You can't quantify it as much, but it's sort of visible. And go to the other extreme, something that we are in the midst of right now. We all have heard of IQ. We have heard of then EQ, and we have heard of SQ, which is social quotient. But have you heard of AQ, adversity quotient? So my guess is that companies are also trying to assess what's the adversity quotient of this young person that they're trying to hire. So that's a skill set. Are we optimistic? Are we able to say that, I will still get things done regardless of the challenges? Everything doesn't have to be completely database, for example. So I think all these are sort of skill sets, which I think will be a lot more important than academic qualifications. And of course, the world is moving at such a hectic pace, you have to be constantly learning. And therefore, are you demonstrating that ability to learn constantly? Because what you've learned today in university, 5-7 years from now, may not be that relevant, except for.
Yeah, you're right. And, personally, if I look at my career, I work for a leading technology company. And trust me, Colonel Gopal, I never read anything about technology. In my wildest of the dreams, I did not prepare for the kind of career that I have had. I'm sure you look at yourself, having spent 30 years in the Indian Army, it's very, very interesting how we are educating and re-educating ourselves again and again. In this context, Colonel Gopal, how are you seeing the role of technology evolving?
Are you specifically referring to education, formal education? Is that
Let's look at it in a slightly holistic perspective. First of all, of course, in the education sector, EdTech, any which was very, very strong even before the pandemic hit us. Newer ways of learning, dissemination of education were evolving. And then this pandemic happened where technology kind of replaced the physical infrastructure part of it. So that's so I see technology in education in three ways. One, as a replacement of the physical infrastructure, which is the role that it is currently playing. Second was essentially around the evolving edtech platforms and newer things that were happening. I mean, we've had the Baijus or the Vedantus of the world in this part of the world. And then, of course, it's the technology that you used alongside physical infrastructure. So all three are evolving. So going forward, what do you think? Because we also hear, at least in the world of work, that a large population or working population will not return back to their offices and they will continue to work remotely forever. In fact, truth be told, I've got two kids. Both of them are almost literally dying to go back to school now, right? My daughter, Colonel Gopal, as you know, she's in Shiv Nadar school. She's in her final year, 12th standard, and her biggest concern these days is that I'm not creating enough memories of the school, of the campus. What will I relive after 20 years, right? So from those perspective, how do you see the role of technology evolving? And then I want to dwell further on these memories that people create in physical infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke about many very interesting things. And if this is, anyone who's in education right now is so seized with all these thoughts and where we are going from there. So, in so many ways, I think over the last 10-15 years, technology has certainly educated people, right? Maybe informally. I just closed this door. I think it's being noisy. Sorry. So I think technology has certainly been educating us. And, often I talk to teachers and senior students at school and tell them there are only three ways to learn, only three ways to learn. Of course, there must be many, but it's just nice to, when you teach, to say there are only three ways to learn. So for me, travel, listening to interesting people. And because you can't travel and listen to interesting people every day of your life, so I tell them, read. And that's three ways to learn. But there's no greater educator than traveling. And there's nothing greater than listening to interesting people and to read. Now, look at what technology is bringing into any person who's willing to learn on their palm. which is travel, which is uh, let's say TED Talk, so you can listen to as many interesting, amazing people as you want, and obviously you can read. So I think technology gives incredible opportunities to learn. It's incredible in every which way. The problem is only, of course, of choice, and the problem is also that there's only 24 hours to spend your time, and that's where the challenge comes in as to what is the choice you make and how do you choose to spend your 24 hours, because it can't be all technology, because we are still human beings and our primal instincts are much more than what technology can give us. Therefore, for students like your daughter, uh, I often say, you cannot probably fall in love or learn basketball through online medium. Both these things you need to do physically. You got to meet people, you got to read people's eyes, you got to learn a particular skill set, which is even sport is a primal urge, right? Yeah, there's the need for the physical activity. There's a need to put a goal in. There's a need to sort of succeed together. So these are all primal instincts, and therefore that part technology will not replace and cannot replace, and therefore the need to go to that physical space, because what we're learning now is that what we actually do in the corridors and in the informal conversations is as much, if not more, education than what we're going to do inside the classroom. And that's what we are missing. And I think that's where technology stops and the rest of the
I'm really
education.
happy. I'm really happy to hear that, because elsewhere we continue to hear that everything will get digitized and technology will do just about everything. But I think your point around meeting interesting people, traveling is absolutely wonderful. Who was that? I think the great traveler Ibn Battuta said, travel leaves you speechless, and then it turns you into a storyteller. Isn't it so
That's
profound?
wonderful. Yeah, that is so wonderful. Probably
So
so
while we
true.
are talking about physical experiences, Kanal Gopal, tell me, what will happen to the school and college life? Is it under threat of being changed, or will the new generations go back to the wonderful days that you and I spent in our college campuses?
Yeah, I think the school and college experience is, in my view, going to be unbeatable. Technology is never going to take that space, and it's more evident now. Sure, there's a amount of stuff technology is doing, and it's really helping us to deliver classes and deliver knowledge and sharing knowledge. But I think the experience of going to a college and building friends and relationships and looking at diversity and looking at people from different perspectives and listening to different perspectives, which also is what a school gives. I don't think that can quite be replaced. So I don't see a threat to brick and mortar at all. Sure, technology can reach a vast swath of people. There could be working professionals, there could be access from places where otherwise you can't access great teachers. So I think technology has a role, but I don't see a threat to the pandemic goes, schools and colleges are going to be back.
No, that's really heartening to hear, because I would give my right arm to go back to the college any day, right? So
I think you guys, the professionals, may prefer to work from home and things like that. I'm not too sure. I mean, the companies may save costs, it saves you traveling time, it makes
So,
the city
it's
less polluted.
interesting. We will perhaps want 30 to 40% of the old flavor, because, sometimes once in a while you need to go to the office, and people like myself and I have a whole lot of colleagues who are in the same boat. We miss travel as well, right? I mean, I had a job where I would travel almost 15 days in a month.
Yeah.
So now suddenly it's been what, 7, 8 months, 9 months, in fact, we've not traveled. So I think bit of travel, bit of office work will come back. I was also jokingly saying that office now will actually become a place of social interactions rather than delivering work. So none of us will go to the office because we have to work there, but we are missing a couple of things. So that paradigm will certainly change, and that's already impacting the way organizations are looking at physical infrastructure from a workplace perspective. So yeah, that's interesting. So Colonel Gopal, everything you said has been very, very interesting. We all know that there is a great rigor and a renewed focus on learning, not just in schools and colleges, but also for professionals. So what is your parting message to the new age learners, Colonel Gopal?
Interesting. I just spoke to a few of the students of a school called Vidya Gyan, which is the foundation's uh, two schools that the Shiv Nadar Foundation runs for children from less privileged backgrounds. It's completely free education, and 56 of those students are in the university on scholarship. They've accomplished getting through the process just like any other student, but they're on scholarship. They couldn't access internet and digital technologies back at home in their villages, so they're here with us. And I was talking to them, and interestingly, one of the young students asked me this question. We were all wearing masks and standing together, and he said, "What are the two things you'd like us to take away?" So this question is easy because I think there are two things I always tell the young. That one, stay curious, stay committed to staying curious. This whole technology bit and the access to the mobile phone and the world on your fingertips gives you one challenge, which is the choices that you make, right? And the choices that you make, if that is around curiosity and learning, then there's a great world out there, because all the time, what are you learning? How are you learning new things and being challenged by the newness and what you're learning? I think that's one. And the other one is probably more to do with our minds and hearts, which is staying happy is not somebody else's responsibility. It's the young. You have to say that it's my own responsibility to be happy. I'm not dependent on someone else to be happy. And I think if you set your mind to saying I'm responsible for my happiness and it's about me, and you'll be a lot happier person. You'll be more successful. And I think just these two things: stay curious, stay happy.
What a wonderful thought. Stay curious and stay happy. Colonel Gopal, it has been a pleasure talking to you today, as always. I've learned a lot from you always, and today it's great that we are able to spread your wisdom to a much larger audience. Thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Shaakun, and thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.